Hello, everyone. Welcome to HuffPost's live event on parenting during COVID-19. It's the first of 3 virtual events we have coming up on parenting. Hi, I'm Lauren Moraski, and I work on strategy and innovation here at HuffPost, and I'll be facilitating things today. So glad that so many of you can join us. As many of us parents know, this is an extremely tricky time and one that's changing by the day. We'll dive into the back to school anxiety a lot of us are feeling and more with our panelists today. But first, just a few important notes before we get things started. We want to make this as interactive as possible, so if you can, start your video. You can find that feature at the bottom left of your screen. Secondly, we want to hear from you. So if you have a question you'd like to ask our panel today, all you have to do is raise your virtual hand. You can do that by clicking participants at the bottom of your screen. And then you'll see a panel open up on the right with the raise hand option. You can click that button when you have a question to ask. And if you're on the mobile device, click the More button at the bottom right and select Raise Hand. If you want, we can try to raise our hands right now and try to start it. Raise our hands. Let's see to make sure it's working for everyone. Okay, I'm seeing some hands raising. You can go ahead and lower that hand. So after you click Raise Hand, be sure to check your chat box at the bottom of your screen. You'll receive a message from one of our HuffPost moderators. They all have pink and green backgrounds. Hey guys. We'll try to get to your question, and then when it's your turn, we'll call you up live. And if you do have a question today, I encourage you to click that Raise Hand button as soon as possible so we have time to get to your question and chat you. And if you submitted a question during registration, our moderators may reach out to you to see if you want to ask it live today. So check that chat feature periodically to see if you have a message from one of us. And those same moderators with the pink and green backgrounds, they can answer any technical questions you may have as well. And just a reminder, our speakers aren't able to answer specific medical or legal questions today. And one more thing before we get things rolling, if you'd like to support our journalism, think about joining HuffPost membership. You'll get access to our comments section and invites to virtual events like this one. Plus, you'll get the option to join our exclusive members-only newsletter, Self-Care is Good Parenting. Well, that's all from me for now. I'm going to toss it to my lovely colleagues, Kate Palmer, head of HuffPost Life, and Kate Auletta, senior editor of Culture and Parenting. Gals, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I know everybody's very busy and is juggling work and kids and everything in your lives right now. So we really appreciate your time today. So I thought we would start by introducing Kate and myself and telling you a little bit about who we are and what we're kind of going through as all of this is happening around us. So I work full-time. I run the HuffPost Life account and our section. And so that's food and parenting and culture and relationships and wellness and lots of topics like that. And it's been really interesting and exciting during this time. But I also have 2 kids, 2 little girls, one going into kindergarten this year. So it's going to be a really interesting time. And another one who's 18 months old and has just become a crazy toddler. So dealing with a lot of that, but also working remotely with all of our team across the country and with our global editions around the world. So we kind of run the gamut of everything that we are seeing. I don't know what our school district, I live in Long Island, just outside of New York City. And I don't know what we have planned for the fall. We're going to try to figure it out as we go along. But we're just, you know, as you guys know, New York kind of had the big bulk of our cases in the March, April, May period. So we're starting to, you know, ease back into extracurricular life and so soccer practice and things like that. Anything outside we can manage, and starting to remember, you know, what life was looking like before all of this hit. So we thought we would talk a little bit about looking forward to back to school season and reflecting on the year that we've had so far. Talk about the stresses of the spring and what it's like now to stare into the unknown of the fall while giving you some science and expert-backed advice and tips on how you can take care of yourself right now, and remind you that it's okay to be a little selfish. At HuffPost Life, we're very big believers in the idea that you need to put on your own mask and take care of yourself before you can be the best parent that we know you want to be, and be as confident and be able to handle all of these things, and even in the midst of all of this uncertainty. Another thing I wanted to add is just that we want to recognize that we are all in very different places right now, physically, emotionally, with the pandemic, and everything that we say today isn't necessarily going to apply to every one of you who's joining us today. That's okay. We would love to hear your questions and try to address them. And we know that some of you already have made decisions about what's going to be happening in the fall. Some of you know you're going to be doing remote work, or that your kids are going to be, heading back to school. And just, we'll try to offer you as much advice as we can, knowing that there is still a ton we don't know. The one thing we do know so far, though, is that we have a little bit of a benefit of knowing what we're about to get into versus the spring, where we were all just kind of thrown into this massive bit of uncertainty. So before we start, we wanted to ask you guys to take part in a poll. And we wanted to ask you just to kind of give us some guide rails around how you're feeling about your own school's plans. And the question is, how confident are you in your school's plan or your school district's plans and how they've communicated to you for back to school season? Are you feeling very confident? Are you feeling like you aren't really sure? You don't think that they have enough information to know how to handle this and they haven't really communicated enough with you? Do you have just zero confidence and you're really disappointed? I hope that's not the case, but certainly could be. Or you just have no idea and are trying to not think about it until it is a little down the road. Let us know. That would be helpful. And with that, I'd love to introduce you to my amazing, brilliant colleague, Kate Auletta, who runs our parenting section and can tell you a little bit about her own experience and how we're covering this on parenting.
Hi, I'm the other Kate, as they call us. They call us the Kates. I am the mom of two young boys. So I have a kid going to second grade and a kid going into pre-K. Right now, we're in the public school district in Westchester, which is just north of New York City. And right now, it's looking like they'll do 50% of the time for the elementary schools. So half days, I'm thinking. So it's a little bit up in the air at the moment for us as well, even though Kate and I are not that far apart. The content that we've done on HuffPost Parents through all of this has been really a selfish drive for me because I need the answers just as much as you guys do. So we started off by collecting ideas for 20-minute activities for kids to do, for how to get through a Zoom call, to how to explain this to your children, how to get them to wear their face masks. All this has been done because my team, I oversee 2 reporters on parents, one of whom is a mom also of 2 young boys, and one of them is not. We all have these questions together. So it's been a collective, how do we do this, that we've gotten, luckily have the space and time and ability to get the answers for. I obviously work full-time from home. My husband is a professor at a local college here. So we are both juggling full-time work and teaching, which we clearly did not do so great at in the spring. So I'm really hopeful that the fall, we at least get a month or so of school before, I don't know, we shut down again. I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but I'm just hopeful that we get some sort of schooling. So that's sort of that's the gist of me. And do we have results yet on the poll while I'm finished talking? By any chance? Okay.
So it looks like 41% of you guys said you really don't think they know how to handle this, haven't communicated enough about how they're going to keep us safe. And another 34% feel very confident and know that the school or the district is trying their best in unprecedented times. I think, with 14% say I have no idea and 10% no confidence. Yeah, I think that the uncertainty is part of what we have been juggling with really since February, March. And part of what we are going to talk to you guys about today is how to deal with that uncertainty. The fact that it is just a fact of life right now and can be really, really stressful, especially as you're trying to be a confident parent and also just a human being in the middle of all of this. So that emotional roller coaster of feeling like you don't, one day you have it all together and the next day you have no confidence in what your plans are, what your community's plans are going to be. How do we deal with that, Kate? I mean, I know personally, it feels like a roller coaster that we're on. And I know you've done some reporting on this, and I'm just curious how you're dealing with it and how you can tell others, give it anybody else some advice on how to deal with that.
My coworker, Catherine, and I were talking last week or 2 weeks ago, and she is the mom of 2 boys. And I said, how are you doing? And she said, honestly, I'm kind of dead inside. And I was like, oh, good, me too. I'm also dead inside. And so I We wrote a really great piece about this numbness that parents are feeling, and just the ability, just that we're all so, as mothers and as parents, we just want the best for our children. We want to plan and do everything, and we just haven't been able to. And that we've spent the last 4 months having to live day by day, and that now we're being told to plan ahead for the next few months is like mental whiplash. And the numbness is real. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she had a great analogy for it, which was that, if you're told to run 100 miles, you can run 100 miles, not no problem, but you know there's an end in sight. Whereas if you're told to run indefinitely, it's a lot harder because you don't know when the end point is. And she said, and she lives in California, and she said, it's like we ran the 100 miles. We did it. Hurrah, congrats. And now we're being told to run indefinitely. And it's just that up and down, how to control this is driving people completely up the wall. Understandably, the anxiety of all of this and the fear is really real. So that's what we've been finding, that most parents are just, we're at our wit's end, but we know we have to keep going. And that's a challenge.
And nobody can sustain that kind of adrenaline or that fight or flight sense for this long and still come out of it without any kind of real trauma, honestly. We put together a really great package on how to dip your toe into therapy if you've never done that before. Last year, we called it You Should See Someone. And the idea was that if you maybe have just never considered this, where do you go from here? Maybe you want to try it for the first time and you think, this could be a good time. And we really didn't understand how prescient that was going to be. And I would love if we could share that package, because I think there's something in there for everybody who maybe now would be a time to think about teletherapy or finding a support group near you just to deal with daily life. There's no harm in reaching out when you need a little help just to deal with everything. So I hope that is helpful for you guys. We thought we would take one more poll, just again to kind of hear from you guys about what coping mechanisms you've found to help keep you grounded and calm right now as a parent. We have some examples of ways to cope, but I know these aren't by any stretch of the imagination comprehensive. So are you like trying to take more time to be present and play with your kids, maybe zoning out in front of the TV or reading a good book? I've gotten really into a few shows. I know Kate and I both really like I'm Sorry, and I've gotten into the Revolutionary War turn, and that's been a nice little break. Are you finding some solo time away, even if it's like a grocery run or Target run, something like that, whenever that's possible? I know that's kind of laughable at this moment, but whenever you can. Do you have maybe a staycation or a road trip to just turn away from normal life? All of the wine, sure, no judgment. When I told my husband today that we were going to do a talk about how to deal with the stress of back to school, he said, "Oh, so just an hour on wine recommendations. That's amazing." That was neat. Are you exercising more, or are you just finding that you haven't figured out a way to do this at all? No judgment, but we'd love to hear from you guys about what you are doing to cope. One of the things that Kate and I have found when we have been reporting this out is that, in the beginning, a lot of our readers wanted to know, what is safe? What can I do right now that is a safe thing to do? How do I protect my family and myself? And we did a lot of that early on. We talked about how to wear a face mask properly, where to get one, this kind of thing, how to social distance, how to tell family you're not prepared to go to a party, that kind of thing. And what we found as this pandemic wore on is that it wasn't so much about telling or offering advice about what was safe, but actually helping people figure out how to ask the questions about what is safe for you. What's like a guidepost or a rubric you could have for yourself to decide if something makes sense for your family, and what kind of questions you can ask before you make your own decision? Because ultimately, all these decisions we're making right now are about about what's best for you. So, Kate, thinking about your own life and what we're hearing from readers and what we're finding in our reporting, how are you finding we can make decisions, the big decisions that loom for the fall?
I think the first thing that you need to remember is to treat yourself with some grace. None of us have done this before. We have no idea how to do this. There's no rule book for how to do any of this. So So probably about a week or two into staying at home in the spring, I had my dining room was my schoolroom. I had all these whiteboards put out. I had calendars, I had schedules, I had the whole thing. And all those Google Docs, all these moms created with all the things of what you're supposed to be doing. And I was driving myself crazy. And I looked at myself and I was like, I am not the perfect Pinterest parent. This is never going to be my jam. I need to just treat myself with some grace and take it down a level. And once I did that, everything went so much more smoothly because I could just breathe a little bit better. I wasn't putting all these undue expectations on myself. So the thing I would say is to remember how you felt in March and April and continue that into the fall. Treat yourself with some grace and patience, because this is going to be a long haul, obviously. Remember when we thought it was going to be 2 weeks, which is so laughable at this point. The other thing to think about is that we did some reporting on was just acknowledging the spring and its traumas, like acknowledging what worked, what didn't, and more importantly, what you felt that you had control over that you can control again. Like what made everything function better for your household during all of this? What were some of the triggers that set you or your children off when school happened? Were there certain times of the day when you could get more done? Was 1 to 3 the time? My older son, after 2 o'clock, he was just done. So can you cram in as much as you can in the morning time? What are some of the things that you can mold for your family that doesn't look like a normal day? And similar to that is, scrapping what a regular work week or a work day looks like in your household, right? So saying, waking up time doesn't matter anymore because whatever sleep they can get is probably important for them at this point. Schedules can be totally off and that's okay. And the grace goes to that as well. Just saying to your family, this is what we have to do to survive right now. And that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. It's like also trying to focus a little bit on, dare I say, some of the positives of the moment where maybe kids aren't rushing to a bus or to extracurricular activities. And, we're all able to slow down just a moment and finding ways to enjoy that, I think is really important right now, even though everything else feels like it's so out of control.
Yeah. I mean, I have not yelled at my kids about getting their shoes on faster in like months.
Yeah.
So that's one good thing.
The shoes. That's
totally.
Yeah. One of the things too that I've noticed is that, local businesses and, schools to some extent, but there are a lot of places in, our local areas where they have also tried to figure out ways to make their businesses more sustainable and to do things that are more outdoors. So like maybe there's an outdoor yoga studio or a plan for a music lesson for your kids that might be outside. So I think taking advantage of some things that exist today that didn't back in the spring. And again, this is not meant to be an indictment on a lot of the places where that is just not an option right now. We totally understand that. My parents are in Florida and I'm worried every day about them. But where the pandemic has started to recede, I think we can also see that there are businesses that have started to figure out ways to both keep themselves afloat and also offer some opportunities that didn't exist before. So take a look at your local area and see what might be a possibility that didn't seem like it was something that could happen in the spring. Another thing that I try to figure out right now and think a lot about is how to maintain some sense of confidence for to your kids, even when you're not feeling it yourself. And given that we're going to have to make a ton of big decisions about their lives and our families' lives in the next few weeks, I'm curious, Kate, how you are thinking about having that level of confidence and not just portraying it to your kids, but also trying to shore it up for yourself. How do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to admit to your kids that there's no right answer. No one really knows the right answer. But if you do know what's right for your family, even if you can second guess yourself all you want, you do know what's right. So Dr. Becky Kennedy is on Instagram. She's a wonderful therapist on Instagram. I suggest you follow her. She put this thing on Instagram probably a week or so ago that Kate and I were talking about. That was basically like how you take responsibility for your decision to either send your kids to school, to keep them home, whatever that may be to you, was to tell your kids, I'm the decision maker for our family. I take responsibility for my decision being wrong. That's on me. This is what my decision goes for the family. It's my responsibility to keep you safe the best that I know how. And this is what I've decided. So taking responsibility for that has was kind of eye-opening to me. I was really struggling with what to do with the kids in the fall. And then when I saw that, I stopped because I realized that I could decide if I wanted to send my kids to school, I can decide when to pull them out. I can decide what the threshold is for me. And I think taking that personal responsibility and saying, and reconciling that with what you want to do. So knowing that you can say, I'll send my kids back, but as soon as there's an uptick in cases, I'm pulling them, which is what we're going to do. Or if it's, I've decided to keep my kids home entirely, owning that and explain to your kids that you own that decision. And that is, if they are so mad at you come October that they are not in school, they can be mad at you all you want, but it's your decision as the primary, or as you and your partner, your co-parent, whatever that may look like to you. That's the important thing. That gave me a lot of confidence and a lot of calm, just to know that I had that option, which I did know, but I didn't really think of it in those terms. That was huge. Now come back to me in the fall with my kids and I'll be like sucking my thumb in the corner, like, why did I do this? But that's that gave me a lot of calm personally.
Right.
I really suggest you follow her on Instagram too. I can send the link to everybody later.
Great. Yeah, I think it's hard as parents when we're trying to take care of ourselves too, but just remembering that there is power and confidence that comes from just being the one who makes the decision. Like no one's going to come out and tell us what's right for you, and knowing that you own that, you're right. It helps to just maintain some level of sanity. In terms of other things that we can do as people who are trying to take care of little kids, but also not always little kids. I know there's a lot of people with like teenagers and middle school kids, but just thinking about what we can do to help protect them and help to calm our own nerves. Obviously masks are going to be a big part of the conversation in the fall, and how to get, kids that don't want to deal with masks, or they think they don't look cool, or they don't understand how they should be put on. Like what can we do to make sure that if kids head back out into school or even just to activities, that they're going to deal with these masks and be okay with wearing them and wear them in a way that will actually protect them and us.
Also, I realized we never went through the poll results.
Oh yes, we can do that. Why don't we talk about masks and then we'll do the poll results?
Okay. So for masks, the things that really helped my house is when I got masks of things that the kids liked. So we have a ton of animal masks in my house from the Cincinnati Zoo. They sell really cute face masks. We have a lot of New York Giants face masks. We have a lot of things that just will get them to wear a mask. I don't care. I spent more money on masks because I'm not going to make my own masks. I'm really sorry. I'm not one of those people. All power to you, but I am not. So I think getting the kids to wear a mask is half the battle. Is getting one that they will want to wear. Getting one that they feel comfortable in is like half the battle. I think also practicing and modeling it for your kids and not saying, oh, I don't want to wear this thing. This is so cumbersome. Just stop moaning about it and just do it. And show that you are confident and you're fine wearing it. It doesn't make you uncomfortable. I think the other thing is you see a lot on social media, people saying, I don't know how to tell you to care about other people. I think you can say to your kids, we wear masks to make sure that we aren't spreading germs to other people, unwittingly, that we are making sure that we show people that we respect them enough to wear masks. I think that's a nice message to teach your kids no matter what. And then as kids get ready to go back to school, as you were saying earlier, Kate, when we were having a conversation earlier, in order to get into a routine, you got to start like a week or two in advance. So start extensive hand washing again now. Start, getting them comfortable wearing the masks around the house or in small trips. I think another part of this, which is interesting, that I hadn't thought a lot about, that we did a piece partially on, was get your kids comfortable in saying to a friend that they need space. So if the friend is getting too close to them, make sure your kids know they can ask for space and that it won't be seen as rude, that it's seen as a health thing. Getting them comfortable with that and teaching them that is something they can do not only teaches bodily autonomy, down the road and as we're going, but also just that they have the control to say to somebody like, back up a sec, I need the 6 feet. Kids make fun, if other kids are making fun of them for it, so be it. They're sitting up for themselves. And that's a good lesson to know no matter what.
Right. Yeah, and we ran a story this week earlier by a reporter, Catherine Pearson, about what different schools are doing around the world and maybe what could be adopted in your own hometown. Take a look. I think we might be able to share it, but some of the things that I loved were looking at how kids, and I think this particular one was in China, and they had kids wearing wings, and kids were not supposed to be touching other kids' wings so that they were, in fact, 6 feet apart. So there are things that creative ways that schools can think about this right now. And so as people who are sending our children to school soon, I think we can all be a little louder than maybe we would be during a normal year and thinking about what ideas we're seeing from around the world and, you know, in different places that could be adopted. Asking questions and being vocal right now is sort of your job and is your way of being involved in the decisions that are going to happen. And I know the kinds of questions that I'm thinking about are, you know, how is your school district or your school going to handle, you know, kids getting their hands disinfected when they come to school? How are they going to handle an outbreak? How will they check for symptoms? What other kinds of questions do you have, or would you recommend, Kate, that people could ask of their schools or their school districts right now?
Yeah, I think the question is also like, what will happen? What's the way that they'll let parents know about an outbreak? What's the deal with substitute teachers? Do they have a people ready to go? Or if a teacher gets sick, what happens? Transportation, will that still be happening? After school care, will that still be happening? What will sports look like? Will it be, if they're outdoor sports in the fall, you know, hopefully that's fine, but you just don't know what that will look like. So I think there's a way to be a different kind of class parent this year and to sort of insert yourself a little bit more than you would have maybe, and not in a way that you wouldn't like, but just a way that says like, hey, I'm here to help. I can help with supplies. I can help, that sort of stuff. Join school board meetings that are on Zoom when you can, that sort of thing. I think just being flexible and being, letting them know that you're there and that you're listening and that you have questions and that you will try to help where you can is, we're all in this together, right? So that you might as well be a good community member.
Mm-hmm. And I think the point about teachers is really important too. It's like, we all have heard and know, you know, friends who are teachers and how much they struggle in a normal year with making sure they have the resources that they need and making sure they're meeting the demands from teachers or from parents and students and everything that they need to do to ensure that their kids have a great year and learn what they need to. I think this is going to be an extraordinarily tough year for teachers. And so even though they're going to be your number one touch point as a parent, I would say something I'm reminding myself too, even as we start a whole, you know, new educational path with my kid going to kindergarten. I just think it's going to be so important not to take out your frustrations on your teachers and your worries, and just asking them, you know, what you can do to help, and trying to figure out what are they going to need extra supplies or cleaning supplies that you could potentially help supply if you're able, and it's okay if you're not, but if you are, that's helpful. Maybe they need an extra class parent, and that could be something that you could do to help. That's something we're thinking about. And also just thinking about what you could do to prepare ahead of time with your kid's pediatrician. What do you think about that in the year? I think about my child going back into this little petri dish of other kids who've been tucked away, and maybe their immune systems aren't as strong because they've been so sheltered. But thinking about cold and flu season starting to coincide with this COVID world we're all living in terrifies me to death. And so I'm just curious what advice you have about talking to kids' pediatricians and how we're all going to deal with the cold and flu season.
I think that there's two parts of this. First is, with your pediatrician, ask them what their threshold is. Like, what is their baseline for symptoms that they want to be bothered with? You know, what will they expect you to your kid to be presenting in order to come in there? You don't need to take the kid to the office unnecessarily. So when will they want to be seeing you? I think Catherine Pearson did another piece this week about how to help diagnose your child when they can't explain their symptoms to you. Like, my son, who's 7, is like, my stomach hurts, but also my head hurts. I'm like, well, that's just any other day. Like, I don't know what's actually happening with you. So keep in mind, keep sort of a running list of your own symptoms that you're seeing that you're noticing, so that when the doctor asks, you can provide that answer. But also be overly cautious. I mean, there is still a pandemic happening, even if you're in your area is not having an outbreak at the moment. Be aware of what's happening. If they're coming home with a sudden fever, if they're coming home with any kind of telltale sign, I would call the pediatrician. And then the other part of this that she reported on was just reminding kids it's not their fault. A lot of kids are so scarred and so scared of COVID already because of the last 5 months. If they do get sick, even if it isn't COVID, just remind them that it's not their fault that they got sick. Germs are germs, they happen. We can take that off of their mental load, and that it isn't their fault that anything happens. And I think just reminding them of that will be good for their sanity later on, basically.
Yeah, that's good advice. We forget about the stigma that's going to inevitably be a part of this back to school moment, even if it's not COVID, but just anything that will happen. I can recall when my child got lice last year, how that felt. So
wasn't it great?
Making sure we aren't taking out that frustration on other kids, I think is really important. Another thing that I think is really important right now, I know some people have kids going back to school, next week. But in our area, it tends to be more like, early to mid-September. Whatever period you are in that back to school calendar, I think it's important to try to figure out whether there is any kind of help you might be able to corral, even non-traditional help that you could potentially trust. I realize that's definitely easier said than done, but maybe there is some kind of neighborhood, a neighbor where you guys could do a babysitting share, because there's this one meeting you just really need to focus on once a week, and you have to be present for and not have kids in the background. Or maybe they have a really busy Saturday morning and need some quiet time, so you could watch their kids. So just trying to come up right now with any creative solutions seems like a wise decision too, just to take some of that off of your own mental plate. So we thought at this moment we would take some questions from you guys. Kate and I could talk all day long about this, but we also thought that questions from you all would be helpful at this point. So we'd love to hear anything that you guys might want to ask of us.
Thanks, Kate and Kate. Actually, before we do that, why don't we get those results from that last
poll? Yes, let's do that.
That's so relatable.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So far and away, the number one thing, that people have said, that you guys said you are doing to help you stay grounded and calm right now is exercise. That's so nice. We also, I think, together, but also just as a team with the rest of our colleagues, have been talking about this a lot and thinking too about how to kind of redefine your relationship with exercise right now. If it's not going to a gym or not doing the normal routine you might have had, like how do you work in exercise with your kids? And I'm a big fan of working in any little moments that you can, whether it's like, little lifts while you're, putting your kid's bottle together, or anything that you can do that just makes you feel good. It just reminds me that, you might have too much wine one night and then wake up the next day and say, oh, I shouldn't have had all that to drink. But you never wake up the next day feeling like, oh, I really worked out a little too hard yesterday. I really regret that extra time I spent in the pool or whatever it is that you've done to work out. So it's just a good reminder, I think, that that it can help your body and your mind. But I know, Kate, you've been doing a lot more running, and anything you want to add about that?
I've just been running to get outside more because I don't get outside anymore. I will say, zoning out in front of the television, I watched the entire series of New Girl, and it was fantastic. I highly recommend zoning out in front of New Girl. That's been my just lie there in front of the television like comatose is what I do.
That's great.
Awesome.
And other people said that finding solo time away, even a grocery run, and drinking wine. I think the solo time thing is so important. As hard as it can be, especially if you're a single parent or you don't get a lot, maybe your co-partner is not in the picture, and it is really, really, really tough to get the solo time. So one thing I would say is when you do notice that you're going to have a moment where you're alone, like turn the phone off. Don't, really try to make the most of that and have a little bit of like mindful moment, as, woo-woo as that can sound, but just being able to be alone and present in the moment is really important. And, you'll always have the time to scroll Instagram or do whatever you want to do, but just being able to like not focus on anything else is can be really healthy and helpful. Thank you for that poll. So let's take some questions. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Definitely. Guys, I just want to thank you so much for that great discussion. I have a 1.5-year-old, and making that decision and trying to figure out, am I going to put her back into daycare in 2 weeks? I can really resonate what you said, Kate, about that decision making and owning that decision. So it's a big one. So, but we're going to make it, we're taking her. So we'll go from there. So, but anyway, we have some great questions. We're going to kick it off with a question that we had as a pre-registration question. But just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, click participants and then click the raise hand icon, and one of our hosts will chat you directly. When you respond, just make sure you've selected the correct host name and the blue drop-down button, because it won't default to the last person who chatted you. And then when you're selected to speak, we'll unmute you and I'll call you up live to ask your question. But let's get things rolling with the question submitted in registration. And this one came from Bijou from Texas. And she asks, any tips to care for a 1-year-old child as a full-time working single mom?
I mean, single parents right now just should be getting all of the flowers, all of the honors. It's a hard enough job when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, but thank you and God bless you. So we thought we would offer some advice. We're not sure whether, or this could apply to people who might be working in the home, working remotely, or working outside of the home. I know that those are very different scenarios, but we'll just try to offer some advice to get some time to take care of your kid and handle your job as well. One of the things that we say all the time is just that do not give yourself a hard time about screen time right now. The screen time rules that we all learned when we became parents are completely out the window. I know it may feel, there's a lot of guilt we all feel right now when your kid might be watching a little more, than they normally would. My advice is just to find some shows that you feel, or movies that you feel comfortable with them watching. If you're going to need to put them in front of the TV, like mine is right now, so that you can do whatever you need to do, then, come up with like a list of 20 different episodes or shows that you're comfortable with and you feel like they might be learning something, or at least aren't actively doing damage to themselves. What else do you have, Kate?
For Wildcrats, which is on PBS.
Yes.
It's like my kids remember crazy facts about animals because of the show, and it's adorable, and that's basically taught them, I guess, biology for the last 4 months. The other thing is just, it became clear pretty early on from working from home that we had to get things done in 10 to 15 minute chunks. So I think don't set yourself up for a huge failure by saying, I'm going to get like 3 hours of work done. Probably not going to happen. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Just do 10 to 15 minute chunks. Like you're playing small increment ball games, basically, right? You have to make sure that you can get the little things. We've done some pieces, which I think Ron will share with you, or we can share later too, about small 20-minute activities you can do with your kids. Because really 20 minutes is like the max attention span they have, probably. 1-year-old is probably even less. So just be aware that you're not going to get everything done that you had before. And I think similarly, none of us work from, it used to be that we work from home. Now we live at work. We are on now, for better or worse, all the time. So know that none of us are beholden to a 9-to-5 job as much anymore, and that we can do work at all hours of the day, which is not always great, but try to get things done. For me, with Catherine, who is the mom of 2 boys, we've been working at night when the kids are all asleep because it gives us time to actually think and talk to each other about a story. So that's been, it's not ideal, obviously, but it is what it is. We have to get work done and we can both think then. And so that just, if you can be any flexibility about that, try that.
Yeah, I think the point about work is really important. It's like, how can you have an open and honest dialogue with your manager or your employer about what your bandwidth and your obstacles are right now? Because the more you can communicate about what is not going to be possible, especially during certain hours of the day, I think is really important. And we've also found that just as a parent, audiobooks and podcasts for kids can be really helpful. They might be able to, focus on something else while they're doing, maybe a chore that you have for them or something. Those can be really fun. And also don't forget the power of bribery. Again, probably not the best parenting tip, but sometimes that can be useful, especially if it's something that you don't mind them having, like something that you were already going to do, like a play date with a friend the next week or something like that. they will recover from all of these things that we've been taught that they shouldn't have. It's okay right now. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Bijou actually is on the call. You're unmuted if you have any follow-up questions or things to say.
Yes, thank you so much to both Kates. This information has been great, and I hope you've been seeing my reactions to certain points that you've said so far, so thank you. The follow-up I have is, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she's an only child, and I think for her, she's struggling with, just like all the other kids, right? You know, I want to see my friends. I want to go to an arcade place. I want to go to the swimming pool. But in the instance of, at least in my immediate circle, I don't know any other parents that have, or any other single moms that have an only child. And I worry about how this might affect her if there are any effects, you know, being an only child. She doesn't have other siblings to kind of keep her mind away. So she's glued on her iPad.
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand that. We talk a lot about this actually. And we ran a story that I'm going to see if I don't know if I can add it, but if not, I will make sure that we get it to you. But yeah. Basically the story is like, how is this moment affecting only children in a way that's specific to them? And one of the things that I've heard from friends of mine who have only kids is that they found comforting is the fact that this isn't necessarily that it's, a lot of only children are kind of a little more used to having some time alone, and that was kind of comforting for them, because it was important to remember that they often have better ways of keeping themselves busy and spending time alone that isn't quite as shocking for kids that maybe all of a sudden, you know, are not used to being able to be around a lot of other kids. So that's one thing that I thought was fairly useful. But I will also make sure that this whole article and reporting we've done on this gets to you, because it had a lot of good info.
Kate.
Great, perfect.
Yeah, it's in the chat.
You want to add to that, Kate?
No, I mean, I that's what you said is right. I think if there are people on your street that have kids, you can maybe do social distance outside, you know, chats for them. I'm sure your 9-year-old's over Zoom and FaceTime at this point, but you know, kids are resilient, right? So they are, you know, he or she will be, you said she, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she will be, she will in all likelihood be totally fine from all of this. And she is, you know, I think that what we've also, in that same piece Kate's talking about, we spoke about just how much parents have noticed the relationship with their kids has gotten stronger as a result. So it might seem like this is never ending at the moment, but maybe this will have some really good effects for later on. You know, maybe you guys will get much stronger out of this. I don't know how you're doing it, so I applaud you tremendously. I hope that's helpful in some way.
Thank you both very much.
Sure, thank you for the question.
All right, guys, we have actually another live question. This one comes from Vivian Dodesky. Vivian, we're going to unmute you. Just let us know where you're from and ask us your question.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for taking the question. So my name's Vivian. I'm based down here in Miami, where the cases have just continued to grow exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, I came across some data from the Italian Ministry of Health, where they were saying that it's not just parents that are obviously feeling the stress, kids as well, with 65% having issues falling asleep at night, behavioral temper tantrums, those different kind of indicators of having anxiety issues. I'm curious because I work with a new children's book called Ron and Rona Fight the Corona. It was written by a pediatrician and an elementary school teacher and a father. So really the aim is to open up conversations between parents and kids using age-appropriate terms. I'm curious to know what ways you've found as parents to have these conversations with your kids that also address their mental health.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
There's so many things I could say about this. It's like we could go talk for another hour just on this question. So I think the first part of your question was really about the mental health effects of this on kids, and that's actually one of the pre-sent in questions is similar to this one. So I think we can kind of tackle this together. But you know, early on we were writing a lot about how kids are so clingy. You know, one day my kids would just not leave my side, like in May. I'm like, what is going on? And I realized that they were nervous and scared and anxious. And that was a side effect. They also, you know, we've written about how kids are having, you know, bedwetting accidents, or they've, you know, they have accidents in the toilets and you know, they don't get into the toilet in time when they've been trained for 2 years. This is all things that are completely acceptable and understandable at this point, because this is a mental health challenge for kids. So the clinginess, the anger, the regressions are totally to be expected when something like this happens. When any kind of trauma like this happens, this might not feel like a trauma, but it actually really is. This is totally to be expected with children. As far as the conversations about talking about this go, it's hard, right? I mean, you don't want to scare your children to think that outside's dirty, but outside is dirty. And, you know, you don't want to make them terrified to go outside. One of the things we're dealing with right now with my son, who's 7, is, you know, we kept him home for 4 months. He was inside. It was so cold in New York that he was inside basically for 3.5 months. And he knew not to go outside. He knew not to, you know, he couldn't go to the grocery store. He couldn't go see his friends. And he was inside. And now fast forward 2 months, and he was supposed to send him to school, and he's having whiplash too, of like, wait, I'm supposed to go to inside place now with people again? I'm supposed to do this? What? I don't understand. And he's been asking questions that are completely understandable. Like, I'm supposed to go to an inside building. My classes aren't outside. And I have to say, no, they will probably be inside. You know, we're gonna have to get you okay with that. But that's it's a lot of work, and we're not trained for this sort of thing. So I think it's really about talking to them in age appropriate ways. You know, with my 4-year-old, we say there's a virus going around that can do a lot of harm to a lot of people. So we wear masks outside, we wash our hands, and we avoid people if we can until this sort of passes. And then with my older kid, we're a little more detailed. You know, we say it can, you know, you have to wash your hands and cover your nose when you sneeze, and there's more details you can give, but it's just, it's really tricky, and it's really like a game of chess almost with kids. And
it's like striking a balance.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that too? First of all, we would love to see that book. Kate and her team are constantly sharing books that, you know, we think our audience is into, and that's right in that wheelhouse. So please do share that. Sure. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I just shared a few links of stories that we have done on how you can get your kids to talk about their feelings during this time, because it's not always one of the things we found, both for little kids and older ones actually, is that the stress and anxiety and disappointment and grief that kids are feeling right now, all those big emotions, is coming out in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing some kids that are retreating and not wanting to talk about it. Other kids where you're having just massive discipline issues. I know she won't love me sharing this when she's older, but my almost 6-year-old is having issues that, with like potty training. You know, we've been past that now for years and years, and all of a sudden it's become a thing. And what we find when we talk to different experts about this is that like there are so many different ways where kids stress about this is coming out. And so number one, of course, the thing to do is to have some patience with them and understand that we're all stressed and dealing with this in different ways, and it's coming out, you know, in ways we can't even imagine. But the second thing is learning some techniques, which we lay out in a story that we'll share, about how to talk to kids and get them to open up in a way that might be a little bit more on their level. We expect as adults to be able to say, like, how are you feeling about going back to school? And you're like, oh, it's really terrible. I don't know what to do. But kids, you know, don't, as you know, they don't always know how to put that into words. So trying to figure out how to meet them on their level, maybe it's through art, or maybe it's in the car. I know for some people, being able to, you can get your kid to open up a lot when they're not looking directly at you. So maybe just going for a long drive with your kid and you're looking straight ahead, they're looking out the window. Sometimes that can be really useful, just to get them to kind of share that with you, being in the same space together and not necessarily standing face to face and saying, why won't you tell me what's going on with you? Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that we are all very concerned about the things that our kids might be going through and how that can be you know, how the stress is harming them. But the thing that we don't talk enough about, and, you know, I know Kate and I talk about this a lot, is the positive impacts that some of this can have on our kids right now. Like they are learning some skills that they otherwise might not have learned during a normal school year. They're learning about resilience. They're learning about how to deal with failure or let's say loss of what they had planned. Maybe they're learning to deal with disappointment. And I think as adults, we all know those are skills that you need to have for kids who are emotionally intelligent and can deal with whatever life throws at them. So as stressed as we are about what our kids are going to miss out on and how stressed they are about just dealing with life, part of life is dealing with life and learning how to gather those skills that give us the armor that they need to get through the tough parts of their lives. So it's not all bad.
The two other things I would say to that too is piggybacking onto that, Kate, is, I was my kid's teacher during the George Floyd, all of the George Floyd protests and the killing of this in May and June. I was the one that he was asking questions of, and I got to drive that conversation, which I wouldn't have had the chance to do necessarily because he would have been at school. So those little moments that I've gotten as a result have actually been really wonderful because I've been able to plant more seeds than I thought I was able to. Or I would have been able to otherwise, maybe. The other thing I will say too, back to an earlier point of this is what I found really helpful is when my kids are freaking out about something, 9 times out of 10 these days, it used to be that they're hungry or they're tired. Now it's that they're hungry or they're tired or they're upset, they're anxious about something. So if you can kind of get to their level and strip away all the impatience you have with their tantrum and say, like, what's really going on, and really realize that it could be about something else, that will probably help you connect with your child at some point, even if it's not in the moment, but to say, okay, there's something else. My son, for instance, had a hard time going to sleep last night. He was up for an hour extra than he usually is. He has a play date today outside in our backyard right now. He hasn't seen that friend in 5 months. I'm sure he was anxious about that and he couldn't fall asleep. It's like some things are so easily explainable, but you just don't think about it because you're an adult and you think all these other things are happening, but it's like, he probably was just nervous. Mm-hmm. So, I think just keeping in mind that there's some really simple answers sometimes will help you a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. We had a lot of live questions to get to, so we're going to get right to it. We have at least 3 more, and we're going to try to squeeze it all in. Next up is Mar Fitzgerald from New York. Mar, you're live.
Hi. So yeah, my question was, how can we as parents help other parents and families who maybe don't have everything that they need right now? A lot of information is only coming out in English from the schools. We have English language learners. Sometimes the parents don't speak the language. How can we help with resources, technology, students in temporary housing, these families that don't have what they need? What can we do on the ground in our neighborhoods, in our communities to help these people and these students?
I love that question. We're not going to have all the answers to it, but I want to try to offer a few different things that can be helpful and like actionable. One of the things that has come up a lot is this idea of learning pods and people trying to get, private tutors and things like that. I understand that's really enticing if you have the resources, but I think it's also worth remembering that your actions don't just affect your own kid or your own family. And to the extent, at the same time that this pandemic has happened, we've also, I think, become a lot more aware around how all of our communities need our awareness and our engagement right now. So I would just say that whatever decision we're making about our own kids for the fall, to keep in mind that it's not just about, your one kid, it's also about the resources your public school might need or your, what your local school might need. So that might mean, it might mean going to your school or to local food banks in your community and asking, what do you need right now? We all have big networks that we can rely on. And that could mean, for example, there's a diaper drive in one of the, parenting groups that I'm in. And, sure, you might have offered to help in some way, but just saying, let me know whatever you need to help is one thing, but being able to go to them and say to, various places in community outreach centers, schools, midwife, doula, like birthing centers, like anywhere that you know where they're serving the community, and just saying, hey, what are you guys low on right now? You know, and that's something that you can easily do that actually has a
Direct.
a direct impact, but also like an exponential impact, because it's not just one thing. You know, you can reach out to your local Facebook groups, your parenting groups, and say, look, you know what? I just heard that the food drive near us doesn't have any food or diapers for the next 6 weeks, because a lot of these places have been really hit hard by the pandemic. You know, their normal volunteer cycles and supplies are way down. So I think asking these the places and community centers in your area what they can do and what you need is really important, and finding ways to tap into your own networks. But also, I think on the technology front, we know there's a massive technology divide in this country, and so I think where the schools offer remote learning and this kind of thing is fine, but if it doesn't reach every kid, then you know, then you're just only further exacerbating this division. And so that could be an opportunity to work with local businesses in your area and ask them for some donations, or figuring out ways to donate computers you're not using anymore, or different, you know, an iPod you're not using. But again, trying to figure out where you can move beyond just a single donation of your own and use your networks to, you know, create technology drives, diaper drives, being a node of connection between people that you know who have some resources and areas that need it, I think is really important right now. Kate, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think technology is the big one. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about just calling friends and saying, do you have any extra, you know, if any older iPads or older computers that our family is not using that we can donate to the school to help out, that will, I'm hopeful will help the divide there.
We actually did that this week. We donated two iPads to our daycare, just to, you know, help them out during this time, because they're going more technological instead of having in person. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, for your question. We have another live question to get to next. And this is from Jessica Wilson. We're going to bring you up next. Just let us know where you're from. Jessica, are you here with us? Hey, Jessica, you're up live. All right, well, we will get back to you. If you come back, just let us know. I know that we have another question or comment, a question from one of the folks actually on the line who had a question about setting up a quarantine bubble with 1 or 2 families. Do you think that's a good idea so you have playmates and childcare support? Do you have anything to share about this, Kate and Kate?
I think it's definitely a different answer depending on where you are in the country. I'm not exactly sure where you are, but and again, I don't want to offer any like health advice, given that we aren't doctors, but I do think where you can find people with whom you can create a circle of trust, if you will, and help to share childcare. Any kind of help you can create on the childcare front, so some of you can get a little bit of work done and work around that, I think is always a good thing. Anything you want to add to that, Kate?
Yeah, I think as long as, I mean, the pieces we've done about this have really just been about making sure you're brutally honest, right? So
right.
Making sure that, you know, everyone knows exactly what you're in for, where you're going, so there's no surprises, right? So no one just says, surprise, I have COVID. Like, you are very, very clear as to where you're going, what your expectations are for each other and for the hours. I think would be, you know, if you're going to go away together, then great, but just be very clear, almost like an au pair contract or a nanny contract ahead of time. Just like, it doesn't have to be that formal, but just something that is just really written out or spoken out about what are the guidelines you're expecting, and making sure that you guys agree on that.
Shared set of expectations and obligations.
Great. And before we wind down, I just want to see if Jessica is available to join us with her question one last time.
Sorry, Lauren, Jessica doesn't have a mic working, so she's wondering if she can ask her question for her, please.
Oh, yeah, sure. So Jessica says, how can parents like me, a single mom who just lost her job, who rely on support from elderly parents who need to be in physical contact with their grandchild, manage the fear and pre-existing guilt that I'm putting them at risk, but that I can't do it without them when the option to keep my child at home does him harm by keeping him from his needed therapies? Does that work?
I'm sorry that this pandemic has hit you so hard. I think, like we said at the top, I think there's no one size fits all answer for you. But I also want to say, there's millions of households around the country where the intergenerational coexistence is something that is not, it's not only something that can't be helped, it's a blessing. I would love to have my my parents live with us, and I hope that, whatever piece you can find from the fact that that is a thing that will give your child some extra love and attention and wisdom, that is a good thing. And, I think doing whatever you can to make sure that you are minimizing your risk and your child's risk from coming home and giving it to your parents, which I think is what you're concerned about. Trying to figure out how you can get tested as frequently as possible. I'm not sure where you are, but I know in most places that is available for free from state and local municipalities. Wearing masks, when you're going out, like doing all those things, the regular sanitation or sanitary things that you can do to make sure you guys are all staying safe. Again, talking to your kids about hand washing and all those things before you come back in and greet your parents. Those are just the very basic things that I'm sure you already know and are doing a lot. But I would just say try to keep your mind on the positive aspects of being all together under the same roof, because that won't always be the case, and it isn't true for a lot of people who would love to be together. And you can only do what you can do, and try not to beat yourself up about it too much, because it is a nice thing to be able to be together too. Kate, anything you want to add about that?
That's exactly what I would have said.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for that question, Jessica. And Kate, thank you so much for such a wonderful discussion. We're not done yet, because we would love to have you take one more poll before we wrap up. And this one involves future virtual events like this one. So if we can launch that poll, basically we want to know which virtual event you would like to you'd be most interested in joining next. An exploration of the changing workplace, a media literacy and fact-checking workshop, discussion on COVID-19 and social justice, self-care forums, or do you have something else in mind? So while that poll is running, I'm just going to ask you to mark your calendars for our next parenting event. It's scheduled for August 19th, and this one's free also for HuffPost members. And just a reminder that basic membership gets you into the HuffPost community, where you can comment on our stories, do online forums, and receive personal event invites like this one. And if you want to financially support the work we're doing, and you're able to do so, you may want to consider joining HuffPost Plus as a monthly or annual paid member. And lastly, we'd love to hear what you think about today's event. So we'll be sending out a survey. So be on the lookout for that in your inbox. And yeah, maybe we can get the results of that poll. I would love to see what folks, all right, so it's pretty even spread here. We have quite a few people interested in a changing workplace, a discussion on the intersection of COVID-19 and justice movement also up high. So we'll be keeping that in mind for our future events. And before we wrap, there's one last poll. We just want to know whether or not you're a HuffPost member or interested in becoming one. And while that poll is running, I just want to thank Kate and Kate for all of your great tips today. I was taking a lot of mental notes personally, and I'm definitely going to be reading a lot of the stories that was shared in the chat.
Thank you so much. So fun. It really actually helped me distill all of my thoughts. So I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.